Hello, hello. Can everyone hear me? Happy to see that many people attending our association AMA. If someone could confirm in the chat that you're able to hear me fine, that would be amazing. And then we can start the call. Oh, great. Thank you, Lorenzo. So welcome everyone to this association AMA. We wanted to host this call to provide a bit more context and explanations around staking, stOBOL governance. It's a complicated, those are complicated things, and we are bringing a lot of new features and new things to the table. And so we wanted to take a moment and openly discuss everything with you guys. And to accompany me on this journey, Tom, I mentioned you cannot hear me? Yeah, okay, you guys can hear me. That's fine. So with me, I have a few guests, including Thomas from our very own association. So I will start with Thomas on stage, if you could. So Thomas, welcome to the stage. If you could give us a few words about yourself, give us a bit of background, and then we will bring our other guests on stage as well. Thomas, can you hear me? Thomas, can you hear me?
Hey everybody, excited to be running a few more of these AMAs. So we really aim to do. Yeah, I think I'm just a bit delayed, but I hear you okay. So yeah, excited to be running these once again and looking forward to dig a bit more today into staking, stOBOL. Cannot hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you fine. We can hear you perfectly, Thomas. Okay, I'll bring the other guest first. If Raf, I can get you on stage. Raf, if you could introduce yourself during why we thought kind of the audio issues on Thomas' side. Raf, welcome. Thank you for jumping in. I would love to hear a bit more about what you do. You're the CTO of Tally. If you could tell us a bit more about your background before we kick and start the conversation.
Hey everyone, and thank you, Leo, for having me. As you mentioned, Leo, I work on Tally, which you may be familiar with as a software platform that powers Obol's governance and staking. So I've been working on Tally for over 4 years now, and our goal is to make it easier for organizations and protocols to run in a credibly neutral way. We think it's really important that the infrastructure of blockchains and of the internet is neutral. That means it's pretty clear to users what the upgrade paths look like, what the software does, what the who has control over the protocol, and which parts are changeable by governance, which parts are not changeable. And that's why we've been working on Tally for the past few years, working especially with infrastructure and DeFi protocols like Obol. And we work at both the application and smart contract layer to make it easy for Obol holders to have both say and decision-making power with Obol and economic exposure to the success of the Obol protocol.
Amazing. Thank you for the intro. We will have a lot to talk about for sure, and very glad that we can have you on stage to give a bit more color and also technical insights to support this whole conversation. Thomas, I believe your audio is fixed, so welcome back, this time for good. If you could also Thomas, you're the CEO of the Obol Association. if you could also say a few words about yourself, what the association is doing, and the topic of today.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, everybody, for a little technical misstep there. So yeah, quite excited to be running these again, updating all of our delegates. It feels like we launched the collective yesterday, but the month really fly back, and we already at least have 4 or 5 significant milestones there in terms of the OIPs. So happy to dig into the latest today, share a bit more of our vision there, and seeing how the governance of the collective evolve. My role as the CEO of the association is really just to be the steward and safeguard governance, provide some guidance where relevant, and make sure we can remain like an efficient collective while aiming for decentralization over time.
Yeah, and I think that's why there is a key aspect, trying to strike that balance between staying competitive, productive, and also being like embodying the core values of Web3 and transparency values. So last but not least, we also have Ben from ScopeLift, who is with us today. Ben, I'm going to bring you on stage as well. I'm happy to let you introduce yourself, and then we will slowly kick off the today's AMA.
Well, yeah, I'm Ben Francesco. I'm the founder and CEO of ScopeLift. We're an EVM smart contract dev team building in the Ethereum ecosystem for many years now, 5 or 6 years. And we have a special focus on DAO governance related engineering. So building the smart contracts that enable the kind of neutral and transparent governance that Raf from Tally was just mentioning. So we've been working on that for several years, had the opportunity to work with a bunch of great projects, including the Tally team and including Obol. So excited to talk today about everything that we've been working on.
Great. Yeah, it has been a really great journey working with both Tally and ScopeLift so far. So happy to share a bit more on how that relationship was structured and what you guys do behind the scenes, if I can say. Let's move on to the agenda of the day. Well, also there's me, Leo. I guess most of you guys know me, whether you are delegates or in the community. I used to be in charge of the community, so 2 years ago, so most of you might know my face already. I've been obviously talking about a lot with most of the delegates over the past few months, as I've recently taken over managing the governance for the association. So you might have known me for like both sources. I'll be here today to act first to Thomas and myself will do some kind of some short presentation to give you a bit of explanation around a few key concepts. And then I will act as moderator for more of an open discussion, which actually is already a bit of a teaser of the agenda for today. So we will start with taking a few minutes to cover a proper overview of what stOBOL, staked OBOL, is. We will also talk with Thomas during this short presentation about the governance mechanism and mechanics and what are the impacts of the new releases and features that we are implementing on governance. We are bringing lots of new things to the table, and that will have an impact both for delegates and so the governance mechanics, but also for token holders looking to accrue staking rewards and to be involved in the space. So without further ado, I will keep on sharing my screen, and Thomas will kick it back to you. If you could get us started with the staking flow.
Cool, awesome. Yeah, happy to first start maybe with a little bit more background on why staking matters and especially governance staking. This is a relatively new concept, and Obol is actually super excited to be on the front line of collective and DAOs out there that are enabling staking, governance staking, so that governance and DeFi and rewards in general can work really in tandem rather than against each other. So that's really what this system allows us, is DeFi and rewards and staking, all the while preserving governance participation. this is relatively new, but it's getting adopted really across the space. So I was actually just converting my maker to Sky the other day, and I noticed that they also have now governance staking. The Rari DAO, where I was speaking yesterday on an AMA, also has that. So it's really getting adopted left and right across collectives. So that's really exciting, and we're super excited ourselves to be pioneering this alongside Tally. So what does it mean to be governance staking your OBOL? So first, you have your OBOL tokens in your wallets. You visit stake.obol.org, and then you receive, after depositing the OBOL into the staker contract, you'll receive stOBOL. stOBOL auto compounds your rewards. So that means that the exchange rate between OBOL and stOBOL won't be 1-to-1. You will receive a smaller amount of stOBOL, and that's very similar to the C tokens from Compound or to wrapped staked ETH from Lido. This is not a rebasing token. You won't get a 1-to-1. You will get the exchange rate that's defined by the amount of tokens that you've already that have already been accruing against the regular OBOL token. What are those rewards? Today, they were voted for 6 months as an incentive package from the collective, I think about 0.3% of the supply to bootstrap the system, but those can be anything. And that's another thing that I really like about governance staking and the way Tally implemented it in a very modular way, is that these rewards can come from anywhere. So while today they're definitely treasury token, in some future, where obviously we also need to be careful in terms of the regulatory landscape, this could be the revenue, for example. It doesn't even necessarily have to be OBOL tokens. It could even be ETH or wrapped ETH, for example. So super modular architecture, and that allows for revenue sharing or just treasury staking, all the while conserving that governance power. So once you have your stOBOL in return, Leo, if you want to go to the next step, that governance power is maintained. So you can still vote on the proposals, whether if you go to like vote.obol.org, or I think Curia also has a nice UI now. And whether you have the OBOL or the staked OBOL, you can still vote. So you get the rewards and you vote. So that's really what we mean by not having to compromise between governance and rewards, staking, and DeFi. Now, the last point is, if you transfer this stOBOL, or if you acquire the stOBOL on a third-party DEX, for example, or someone sends it to you, then that governance power is routed to what we called auto strategies. And I will touch a bit more upon that in a minute. Cool. So if we just like go over the key concepts once again, and Leo can probably animate everything. Staking OBOL means stOBOL. There is no lockup, so that's something very important for us. You are not like locking in a similar fashion. Maybe some of you are familiar with V tokenomics, where you might have to stake or lock up to 4 years. No, this is like all like next block unlock. So really no unlock. That's what I mean. The liquidity profile are very similar between the two assets. You can go in and go out as you want. stOBOL accrues the yield, so the rate against OBOL is increasing. So that's why you will get fewer amount of token as you stake. It retains the governance power, as we discussed. It is routed to the different strategies, which I'll touch upon, and it can be used in DeFi. And that's very powerful, because suddenly you have actually a token that can be great collateral because it is revenue bearing. Think of it as borrowing, for example, USDC against your stOBOL in the same way that you would borrow USDC against your wrapped staked Ether from Lido. These are great tokens to be used as collateral. You don't necessarily want to sell those, so you can actually borrow against them and almost become this self-repaying loan that we saw Alchemix back in the day really a pioneer. So this is why we think stOBOL can be this great collateral, or just maybe LP'd in DeFi. And we will share much more around all the DeFi integrations that we have in the pipeline. By the way, shout out to a few of the delegates and teams out there that have submitted grants to help us work on that. So that's all coming and quite exciting on the DeFi integration front. I saw one for Morpho that's super interesting. So going a bit deeper maybe into a few more of these things. just to recap, before we do that, actually, because I saw a bit of confusion when we launched. Yeah, you can go ahead with all the animations there, Leo. I saw a bit of confusion when we did launch stOBOL and around TGE. So both have governance voting power, right? I do recommend to stake it. Not only you get rewards and you conserve your voting power, but both keep your governance. So that means your delegate stays in place. Both are transferable. They're just ERC20s. They're just your regular token in any wallet you might be using. Both can be relatively used in DeFi because they're ERC20. Ethereum L1 is permissionless. You can do anything you want with these tokens. We do recommend to use stOBOL, and this is what we will be pursuing with certain integrations because we just think it's a superior asset because it is yield bearing. And it is obviously the only one that earns staking rewards. So this is really the summary that you need to bear in mind. And I was happy to be on this call now and be able to clarify moving forward what the staking looks like for us.
Nice. Thank you, Thomas. There are also a few points we wanted to clarify because there are some implications with everything here that Thomas just discussed, and we wanted to make sure that it's perfectly understandable for everyone here in the community, whether you are delegates or whether you are a token holder. And so there are implications on both fronts. So basically, the DRS, Delegate Reputation Scoring System that we are bringing into to the table is a score based on multiple parameters. And those parameters include how regularly you vote on proposal as a delegate. It also takes into account the timeliness aspect of things, whether you vote relatively fast after the proposal had been submitted or if you wait until the last second. It will also include, for like a smaller percentage, the impact that we have on the vote. And then on the engagement side of things, it will also include whether you will post a rationale. You can understand this as an explanation of the vote, the reason why you voted for or against something in the forum. Because what we really encourage here is whenever there's a proposal, you might like it, not like it, but what we encourage is like a proper and structured debate with like strong rationale, data points that you can point to. The goal is to progress as a whole collective towards something meaningful and not point on like the little points that you don't like in a proposal. And so we really encourage everyone to like put a bit of time and effort into thinking on why this is important, why this should be or shouldn't be implemented. And so like the forum engagement is a key part of that because it includes the rationale that you can post, it also includes the number of topics you interacted with, the amount of time you spend reading on the forum. And so all in all, those parameters that, by the way, are already being discussed transparently on the forum and that we will publish the final version soon so that everyone can review it and also be aware of all the scoring components. But all in all those parameters make a full score rated from 0 to 100%. And to qualify as an active delegate, a delegate needs to maintain continuously a score above or equal to 65%. And why that is important? This kind of 65% requirement is the key metrics to keep in mind because it will allow delegates to receive compensation for the work they're doing in the ecosystem. The idea is that we want to compensate. No one should work for free. And we want to compensate the delegates that are actually putting in the work, that are spending hours to give advice, to give feedback, to discuss, to propose new implementation or improvements to the collective. And so if that score is achieved, then it will enable the delegates' compensation from the separate pool that I'm not sure if Thomas has mentioned it, but basically it's equivalent to 1/10 of the global staking reward pool, and it comes on top of that. In the future, those two pools might be merged into one, but for now it's an extra pool dedicated for delegates reward. And the second part, maintaining that score will enable delegates to get compensated, but also it will act as a gateway for staking rewards, meaning that a delegate having a score below 65% will not generate staking rewards, not only for him, but also for the people who did delegate the tokens to that delegate, who did give the token to that delegate. And that's actually why the delegate reputation scoring system is also super important for token holders. As a token holder, you are incentivized to assign your delegation to an active and honest delegate. Because if you don't, if the people if the delegates you are like trusting your tokens with has not a score above 60 or equal to 65%, then you as a token holder will not receive staking rewards. And so that's why it's super key. We will touch point on that a bit later in this call. We also are planning to have a proper education campaign on this. Tally will also help us on the UI front to make sure it's super easy to spot and to identify what is an active delegate with a bunch of metrics and key visualizations to help you make a decision. But the TLDR, like the long story short, is that undelegated tokens won't accrue rewards. You can obviously self-delegate, meaning that you just basically get active in governance yourself, but then as a self-delegate, as basically one delegate that you become, you also need to maintain that 65% or above DRS. So just wanted to clarify that. We will explain this a bit more in details and happy to answer any questions that we see in the chat. But this is key, and you will be briefed, and we will share proper training, educating content over the coming weeks to make sure that everyone is on top of this. So to sum up what I just covered, why everything we are implementing is super important. The fact is that now delegates are rewarded for being active, for being transparent, which is like the key values that we really try to embody here with the collective and governance in general. And so this again comes back to no one should work for free, but also we want to incentivize meaningful work and people ready to contribute in a transparent fashion for the better, for the greater good of the collective. And so token holders, on the other hand, because there is this gateway for staking rewards, they're empowered to choose representatives that reflect their values. And so this is also key because it kind of creates this cascading rippling effect towards delegating tokens to people who are actually contributing to the ecosystem. And also it will help to drive more voting power in general to make decision governance and ensure that no tokens, so like the voting power related to tokens, are lost out there. And so this, as a whole, will definitely reduce passive governance and boost accountability. Delegates are accountable to the people who are trusting them with their delegation. And so they need to remain active, remain engaged in order to be compensated, but also for people to keep on trusting them. And the compensation that delegates are perceiving is also linked to the amount of tokens that they are being delegated. And so in all, this will foster, we hope, a more intentional and effective decision-making system where everyone is able to get involved, whether it is by giving a stamp of approval to a delegate by delegating the token, so like directly involved in the community. It's up to you to choose the level of which you want to get involved, but we really hope to create this virtuous environment for decision-making and governance here. So we will stop for the presentation, and we will start, we'll bring our guests, Raf and Ben, back on stage with us as well. And we had a few things we wanted to discuss a bit more in depth. And I think both Raf and Ben expertise is really helpful and will provide a lot of context regarding everything we just said. Thomas will also have the chance to interact and to act here. So without further ado, I propose we stop looking at this presentation and start the actual discussion. Looking forward to it. So give me a quick second here. Okay, perfect. Can you guys all hear me? You are all there. Looking good. So a few questions that we've seen, and something that's actually super interesting. Maybe we can start with you, Rafael, is from Tally's perspective, because you guys are innovating on a lot of things in the space. How does the stOBOL, staking OBOL we designed together, differ from other liquid governance token? Is it like a relatively new concept here? What is it bringing to the table? What's its difference about it? If maybe you can add a bit more color to what we said in the presentation before.
Definitely. We've been thinking about the design for stOBOL for a long time now. We've worked pretty closely with Ben at ScopeLift for more than a year, thinking about the high-level goal was make sure that we can make staking and governance compatible. So I think it's very common for a governance token to also have staking, but most of the time that staking system requires that users choose between participating in governance and staking. That is, if they're staking, they can't also participate in governance. And unsurprisingly, lots of people choose yield. They say, hey, you know, governance is nice to have, but look, I value the economic aspects of this token and I'm going to stake it. And if I can't participate in governance, too bad. We think it's very important for good token design and good protocol design that we don't force users to choose between those two things. They really can't have it all. So that was the primary motivation in, that's where we started in how we designed governance staking. The other thing we were designing for, because we have a lot of experience building smart contracts for tokens and for governance. The other thing we knew was that not every protocol and every project is a little bit different. There's always slightly different things that they want to have, but especially smart contracts are very, you have to build them very carefully, right? You don't want to move fast and break things with a smart contract. You have to be very careful when building them, and you need to do a good job with the audits and the security best practices. So our approach for designing and building the smart contracts was to make them modular. So we built the basic functionality of things that every staking contract is going to need. They're going to need to be able to distribute rewards to stakers. And then we added a lot of different modules, and we have more in the future for different ways to customize it. So that's one thing I'm very excited about for version 2 of OBOL Staking is we'll add some customization around how earning power is calculated. And this is, I think, a very powerful place to extend these governance staking contracts is make it so that we can design a system that incentivizes some behavior. In this case, we're going to be incentivizing people token holders to keep up with what their delegate is doing and make sure their delegate is active, because the token holders will only get the reward if their delegate is active. And this is a great design space for both incentivizing token holders and helping token holders like directing their attention toward their delegate so that the token holders are watching their delegate and keeping them accountable. And this is, I think, one very important loop that we've seen break in very old governance systems where there just isn't really any feedback between a delegate that's not participating and the token holder that isn't even paying attention. They don't even know their delegate isn't participating rationally. They're busy. Maybe they forgot they had these tokens. There's no incentive for them to care if their delegate is active. But this version 2, that the proposal that just passed a couple of weeks ago, does have this new incentive for token holders to be much more active in watching what's happening with their voting power and what their delegates do.
I think there's a lot to unpack here, and I also want to move to Ben for a bit more like how the contracts works and the deployment. But first, I wanted to react, Raf, on so you mentioned lots of tricky things. So like things that we bring to the table, and lots of people need to be aware about the implications of OIP4 and like the delegation scoring system. So I wanted to know a bit more like on the UI front. How do you envision things to guide the user? What would the UI look like from a user perspective, to make sure it's easy to navigate to all those things? Maybe you've made improvements already, but what do you envision like as a user journey to simplify and make sure everyone can get there with like the less friction possible?
Yeah, great question. And that's something we think about a lot because, as you mentioned, this is complex. There's both users are afraid of doing something wrong and somehow something bad happens to their assets. And also we're creating an incentive, and incentives only work if one, they exist, but two, people understand that they exist. They understand like, okay, if I do this, then I'm eligible for this reward. But if they don't know how that works, they're not gonna they're not gonna earn the reward. So we spent a lot of time thinking about how that will work. And after we launch after we build our app and launch it, we get a lot of feedback from people who are using the app, and we keep improving it. So since the launch of stOBOL a month ago, we have made a bunch of improvements around user flows, showing more data, changing the copy, and we have designs for how we will support V2, which involves incentivizing active delegation. So we're going to show the user what their delegate is up to and what they need to do to remain in good standing, for the delegate to remain in good standing, and for the user to get the rewards. And I'm sure we'll get lots of information about how to make that even better after launch. And we're definitely planning to get a lot of feedback and keep improving the flow so that people understand how the system works and what they can do to get the rewards.
Yeah, amazing. I wanted to take the time, and I think you explained it very well. Transparency is key here. If we're asking people to do extra things that are relatively new, innovative in the space, we need to provide them with a way that it's not too much of an overhead to actually get plugged in and get started. So this is really key and something we really want to invest on. And also, like, this will go through multiple iteration process, I believe. And there might even be opportunities for the community to help us build integration, to help us build on top of it, and to improve all that, the process. So it's really more like a collaborative work with Tally, with ScopeLift, with the association, with anyone that want to get involved in the community, to give us feedback on the forum, to discuss. So I think, yeah, this is a really key aspect. And we have a good chance at building something sustainable here for the future, and that's really aligned with all the valuable aspects that there is in delegating and staking in general. Coming back to you, Ben, maybe for a minute, because Raf, you touched on the contracts, and this is not an easy feature to build. And definitely, Ben, I wanted to know if you could walk us a bit through what the deployment of OBOL staking look like on mainnet. Is there maybe any like specification, any things you would like to highlight on the smart contract things, to kind of give us a glance of what's happening behind the curtains on that front?
Yes, sure, absolutely. So the first thing I'll do is just double down on some of the points and maybe expand and add some color on some of the points that Raf made. So, we've spent over a year thinking about and designing and implementing these contracts. And that's because creating a staking system that enables the token holders to retain their governance rights is really like an order of magnitude more difficult than just building a simple staking system, right? So we wanted to do something that was sustainable for DAOs, right? Not just something they could use to blast out some rewards, but created the wrong incentives for token holders, but something that actually allows them to not just allow users to have their cake and eat it too, but even more than that, to use the staking system to properly incentivize and make the DAO sustainable, right? So it's like, level 0 is you don't do anything, you don't think about governance at all. Level 2 is you retain governance rights. And then level 3 is actually you use this system to properly incentivize the DAO for sustainability. And we believe that that's what we've built in the smart contracts here. And as we iterate toward V2 of the system, that we are describing with these, incentives for delegates and delegators, those token holders who are choosing their delegates, it'll be really interesting to see those incentives in place. So in addition to that, we built the system, as Rafa alluded to, in a way that's really modular. So that means that different DAOs can make different choices, but it also means that every DAO that adopts the system, like Obol, can themselves iterate on the incentives and the structure that they set up, right? So first of all, the system is layered, right? There's like a base staking layer that really just provides this sort of complete, like, trust minimized, really transparent infrastructure around staking and distributing rewards. Then above that, you have stOBOL, which adds features like auto compounding and transferability and the ability to use the token in DeFi, et cetera, et cetera. And then plugging into these different layers of the system, you have different modules that we've alluded to already, right? So you have what we call the earning power calculator. This is what allows us to differentiate the rate at which rewards stream based on, say, the actions of the delegate and the delegator, right? And so that's what we're plugging into to enable us to build V2 of the system. We also have the auto delegate. So this is the strategy that enables the tokens that aren't actively delegated, right? Because maybe they're in DeFi or maybe they've been transferred to an address that hasn't picked the delegate, to nonetheless remain active in governance in a way that governance itself gets to decide on. They get to set the rules on how that activity works, but without leaking those passive tokens out of governance in a way that drains the sustainability of governance over time, which is a pattern that we see in other DAOs. So yeah, layers and modularity are really two of the cores of the staking system, and it took a lot of effort and time working with Tally and Obol to get that right. But we feel really confident that we have, and we're excited to see it being used now.
Yeah, and I think that's quite impressive because it's also about building the foundation on the smart contract level that will allow us to build something scalable and sustainable in the future. And so you need to take into account all those like potential future components and make sure everything is compatible and can work together. So it's really no easy thing to do. And I think it's a good area to invest in whenever you want to build something that will scale and hold for like the years to come, which is the goal, right? We're here to stay. We're not here to build like a small scale thing that will soon vanish. We need to think long term, and I think it's important to lay the foundation that will allow us to do that. You mentioned the fallback delegation, Ben, and I think you already gave a really good overview on this. Rafa, I know you also worked a lot on that front. Is there anything you want to add to what Ben said regarding the design of the fallback delegation? Just, like two of the goals being that the voting power doesn't get wasted, as Ben explained already, and also to avoid governance capture. Is there anything you want to add on top of what Ben said on that front?
I think he did a great job. It's a tricky thing to get right, and we're excited to see it live in Obol now to learn how it works. The other place where we thought about the design for that auto delegate is in the interface. We want it to, be as clear and transparent as possible to everyone what this auto delegate is, how it works, and we also want to encourage people not to delegate their tokens to it. So in the UI, we treat being delegated to the auto delegate as kind of like an error state. Like you can end up in the state if you just bought the staked Obol tokens directly on an exchange or someone transferred them to you. This is a starting state, but the interface shows that it's not a state that you're supposed to be in. It's kind of like a warning state, and we'll provide warnings to the users when they're in that state and tell them, they really should delegate. It's better for them to actually pick a delegate rather than leave their voting power in this default algorithmic strategy that isn't particularly smart or helpful to governance. But it is definitely better than doing nothing at all. It's a good backup, but it's not as good as a real delegate who's thinking thoughtfully about what to do with the voting power.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's worth the experiment as well. And again, one other thing we want to commit to is to have this kind of open mindset and be ready to improve things and iterate over time. And so, so the overwhelming we might need to actually clarify the name and make it like a bit more consistent. But like this fallback strategy that you mentioned is one really exciting, or like with high potential new feature that we are bringing to the table, and I'm quite excited about that design. I also wanted to ask you, Thomas, from your perspective in the association, do we envision introducing, if not other delegation model, but maybe complementary models, or making changes to that first model? Like, what might the future look like? Do we have like any other things that we are still exploring to complement everything we just explained?
Absolutely. I think auto strategies are super interesting, again, as this default or error state, maybe initially, and that's what we have, right? Today, if tokens end up with that bot, as certain of you have referred, it will vote only on non-controversial proposals where maybe we're lacking a bit of quorum. So it's definitely helping, but it's still a relatively dumb and not that useful, right? It's safeguarding a bit governance, but I think there is so much more we can do, and I think that's also where we're looking for input from the community. I think some of the ideas that have been flouted in the chat recently would be, for example, we could redistribute that voting power equally across all the existing top 20 delegates, for example, right? So these people that are already participating and are being compensated because they keep their DRS around a certain stage could actually get a bit more voting power. So that's something that I would find quite interesting. Obviously, there are also risks, like with the current implementation. For example, it could lead to more centralization of voting power, right? If you just consolidate across the top 10 or the top 5. So some of the things to think about, but I think the current auto strategy is just a beginning. I think it's fairly low risk. There is not, because of the way it's implemented, it's not going to vote against the decision of the DAO. The humans and the delegates that we have on board today have more than enough voting power to safeguard against any adverse effects, but also really looking forward to explore other auto strategies within the next few months as we see how the current one gets voting and adopted across our proposals.
Yeah,
I think. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Leo.
No, go ahead. Feel free to add on top of what Thomas said.
Okay, great. Yeah, sorry, thanks. I just want to reiterate what Thomas said, which is that because the contracts are built in this modular way, and because the DAO ultimately has the say on how that voting power is distributed, there is like a blank canvas for what those designs could look like. So Thomas, you mentioned that, well, maybe if we just redistribute the voting power to existing delegates proportionally, does that like reinforce or centralize the existing delegates? And maybe not. That's something that the DAO can debate and discuss and experiment with. If the DAO finds or thinks that is the case, it could actually build a module that does the exact opposite, right? So it could spread the voting weight out to small but active delegates with high score as a way of boosting them up and spreading the voting power out further, right? So, is that a good idea or not? I don't know. The point is that the design space, the surface here, is really huge, and there's so many interesting experiments that could be run. And now that we have the core infrastructure that allows for those kinds of modules to be built and designed and agreed upon by the DAO and then put in place, there's a really interesting future ahead for what these different designs could look like.
So glad you're saying this, because I think, and I take responsibility for that in terms of the communication we've done with the delegate and the collective so far, of maybe not explaining the long-term vision of and the modularity that the way we've built and all the things that it allow. And now that you explained it this way, I think it's probably clearer for most people why we started like small and maybe a bit rough on some of the aspects, but it's very flexible in how we want to keep building it. And I hope that clarifies it for a lot of the people that had questions around some of the perceived complexity, but which is actually just like stepping stones that we really allow for simplicity later on.
Yeah, I think those are two really, really great points. To kind of recap what a bit you just said, both Thomas and Ben, I think it's all about we've built an innovation. It's a new strategy that we are putting out there. Is it perfect? No. Has it ways to improve? Yes, a lot. But what's good is that you have the foundation, and that's built in a way that we can iterate upon, we can build on, and you can have this kind of base layer, and then each DAOs, depending on the needs and the orientation they wanna take, can choose to customize that based on feedback from delegates from the community. There's a lot of things we can do. So it's really great that we can put this out there, and then people can grab it, experiment on it, and also same for us. It will be, there will be back and forth with the community. We will receive feedback. We will make improvements, but it definitely brings another component, another layer to the table that is really valuable, which is that voting power don't go wasted, and that we also protect against governance capture based on how it's designed and how we kind of parameter it. So overall, I think it's really exciting, and we're looking forward to collaborate with people on that, on how to make it better together. That's the whole point of this effort here. I want to save a few minutes for questions, but I also want to ask, if possible, each of you guys one more question, because I think that lots of value here. Maybe another one for you, Thomas, and something we touched a bit less on. It's in terms of the use cases that we can hope for Obol. So you mentioned DeFi, and that's a place we want to invest heavily on. Can you maybe share a bit more on what you have in mind, what people can expect for the future of Obol, but also stOBOL? What are we prioritizing? What are we most interested in? If you could share a bit more on that front.
Absolutely. I think token utility is definitely a super interesting topic. And before we go into DeFi a bit more, maybe setting the backdrop of how I like to think about the Obol token. I think in 2025, token utility has evolved a bit more than just trying to create supply sinks across the board where you lock your token and just hope that this removes some of the supply so that the price go up. We've actually seen quite a few projects get off that model. Rocket Pool is a good example where they remove that bonds. And instead, you're seeing all these IPOs and projects now generating a ton of revenue, like Aave and Maker, find mechanisms to distribute that revenue back to the token. And I feel this is more what's going on today with solid projects that I hope we are part of, generate revenue, and then find a way to distribute that. Staking Obol token could be a very easy way to get there. So that's maybe more the framework I'm on. And obviously there is a lot of legal considerations when you distribute revenue. This is not something that's on the plans right now, but that's, I think, something that I'm observing from the market and that I find definitely inspiring. So if that's one avenue, there is still tokens out there, and I think that's super exciting, and that's what blockchains bring to the table. And you can do a lot of things with token that you can't do with stocks, because otherwise we're just tokenized stocks, and tokenized stocks are already a great thing, but tokens are even more exciting, and I think that's why everyone is in this space. So in terms of DeFi, I touched a bit earlier around being able to use stOBOL as collateral. So I think that's one of the projects that we'll look at around maybe an integration with Morpho. I'm just saying they released V2, so we'll see if we launch on V1 or V2 of Morpho, but I think that's definitely something that's interesting. We can be looking at some liquidity mining programs as well, so that's up for people to propose in the DAO. We could be running various type of incentive campaign. We actually have a big one right now where you can get Obol tokens if you stake on Obol. Currently, we have about 1.5 billion TVL. Hopefully, we'll get to 10 billion by the end of the year, which will generate a lot of revenue on our side. So yeah, plenty of things looking forward in terms of DeFi. We'll share more as the weeks come by, and looking forward to suggestions from the community. There is just so many DeFi projects out there, a lot of integrations to build. So looking forward to the community stepping up and telling us which integration they want and helping us build them.
This is super exciting. I think you've done a great job at summarizing this. But yeah, lots more things to come. This is definitely an area we want to invest heavily in. I'll pause here for a sec to ask anyone in the chat, feel free to drop any questions you might have. We collected a bunch of questions before we started this call, so happy to answer those, but feel free to ask anything, either in reaction of what we just discussed over the past 50 minutes, but also like question you might have in general. This is the time to ask, whether it is about staking, about governance in general. So feel free to ask. In the meantime, while you guys are like thinking and putting question in the chat, I do want to close this space with maybe one question for each of you, Ben and Raf. Maybe Ben first. Zooming out from your experience in the space, what has been tricky, or like what are DAO project getting wrong about like the combination of staking and governance mechanism? Like, is there anything you want to share? Anything that you've learned from what you've seen out there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that one of the number one things that I hope we've learned as a space over the last few years is that just launching a token that gives governance rights, right, doesn't create a sustainable structure for the DAO to continue to operate, right? Because ultimately, if passive token holders make the same gains as those who are actively participating in the DAO and trying to drive good outcomes from the DAO, right? Because the only way that you achieve any gain is by appreciation of the token's price. So if passive holders make the same as active participants who are trying to drive good outcomes, then ultimately you're incentivizing passive holding, and you're going to see active participation in DAOs sort of get drained away. And even worse than getting drained away, it starts to tend toward what I would call extractive behavior, right? The only people who are going to actively participate are either those who are just truly altruistic and love the project, that's great, or people who view that they can extract something from the DAO and thus it's worth their time to participate. So I think that mechanisms that simply rely on price appreciation, like token sinks or buyback and burn mechanisms, they don't set up the system in a way that is sustainable in the long term. And as DAO protocols generate more revenue, this becomes a more pressing matter, right? Because the speculative nature of the token price starts to recede, and instead you have an actual, honeypot, a target for, would-be extractive actors to go after, right? And as those things equalize and normalize, we've seen certain DAOs get into trouble with their systems, right? So in the long run, if we want to create DAOs that are actually decentralized in a sustainable way, that actually have community ownership as a collective in a meaningful way, then we have to get these incentive structures right. And it can't be the case that passive token holders do reap the same rewards as those who actively try to drive good outcomes for DAOs.
Yeah, amazing take. Really valuable. I do have one last quick question for you, Raf, as well. Have you seen anything especially like tricky in the design of the delegation model on chain? And like, is there anything you want to share, like in your journey and yeah, how hard it was to implement things, or yeah, just sorry.
Yeah, a lot of the challenges are in the details. This kind of system is the idea here isn't that new. It's been around for years. We picked it because it was something that was familiar to everyone. It was well understood, both like how it would work by the people who wanted to implement the system and use the system, and also when you introduce this concept to a user, it's not a crazy new idea, right? They're familiar with staking. But we spent a lot of time on polishing the small flows, and I think we still have a lot more ideas about how we can continue to polish the small flows around whether it's approving transactions in your wallet or understanding, helping users understand what risks they're taking and what reward they're eligible for and how to get those rewards. I think all of that is something we've spent time and effort making better, and something that we want to continue to optimize. And I think if you step out, there's lots of little micro flows that we want to improve. And then there's one bigger flow that we want to improve, which is just we want more people to know about OBOL staking and that they can stake their OBOL. So we're looking at how to syndicate staked OBOL to more places. Are there other places where users start a staking journey, and we'd love to get staked OBOL available on those places too. Like lots of exchanges have staking pages, and there's staking aggregators that aggregate staked assets across lots of different marketplaces. So we're looking at how we can get OBOL into those places too.
Yeah, that's an exciting long-term vision, definitely. Would be amazing. You might actually be the one to answer this first question I'm receiving here, which is there any plans for gas optimization on Tally, and specifically for casting votes? Like I'm seeing here, like currently, like the current gas fees is like pretty low, which isn't bad. But I think it's a general question of like whether we can improve gas fees, and if that's kind of planned or.
Good question. For voting, it's a little bit harder to improve the gas fees. One, they've been code golfed a lot already. The voting code is, I think, 5 or 5.5 years old now, and it's been through a few different versions. At the Compound and Open Zeppelin teams took a few passes at making voting as optimal as we can make it. It's still, I think, when Ethereum mainnet is expensive, voting is still expensive. One thing that Tally has done recently is made it so we worked with ScopeLift and Wormhole to launch a project called MultiGov, which lets governance live across chains. So one use case of MultiGov is people who are more price sensitive can move their assets to a cheaper chain, and then those votes get bundled up and sent back to the main chain in one transaction. So you could have many hundreds or thousands or millions of votes on a rollup, and then only a few of those transactions, just one or one every day, transactions take all of the votes, bundle them up, and return them to the home chain. So I think as mainnet gets congested in the future, that's one path to scaling voting. And then longer term, there's also some other paths that don't even involve a rollup, where voting could be scaled with some sort of ZK proof or some system that trustlessly aggregates votes that don't even have to hit the chain, right? You wouldn't have to put the votes on chain. You would just put a proof that says all of these votes did happen on chain. And I think that's something longer term that we're looking at today, especially as Ethereum, someday will eventually be congested again, and we'll have to think about scalability solutions for the gas cost of voting. The gas cost of staking, I think, is a similar story, but it's a lot earlier. The staking contracts are not 5.5 years old. They haven't been code golfed as much. So, we'll continue to look at the gas cost down in future versions.
Still a lots of room to improve things, and like a bunch of new exciting things coming in soon. And yeah, I think definitely for someone casting a vote every month, it's already like in a relatively good place in terms of like the price it costs. But for someone engaging in lots of different DAOs, and that could still have an impact. So definitely to see that there are some scalable ways to still improve on that front. I'm also seeing a question, Thomas, seeing a bit of concern or like questioning about the current market cap. And I was wondering if you could comment a bit on that front or provide a bit more context maybe to people.
Sure. Not sure how much I can really help people there. It's not like the association or any other entity is controlling the price. I think we've seen some drama in the past with some market makers doing weird like price controls up or down. I can assure the community that we have none of these deals in place, and that's also probably why the price has been more volatile than maybe some can expect. My focus with the team is to ensure that we're growing TVL, which will grow revenue for the protocol dramatically. Today, 1.5 billion, aiming for 10 billion within 12 months. So that's a 10x in TVL. And then, as you know, we also announced the OBOL stack. Hopefully, we'll bring that modular plug-and-play framework for decentralized apps to market towards the end of the year. I think we can comment on price all day long. My focus is to help the team ship, build great products, get those products get adopted by the market, and then price will will reflect that in time. So that's how I see this. I saw some concerns about the team is selling, that's why the price dump. I can assure you there is none of that ongoing, and that I don't know anything that isn't like public information in terms of the price.
Yeah, I think it's important to think long term here and not like be a bit blinded by like the short term price action of things, which is definitely not us doing shenanigans with anything, but thinking long term and all the value that there is to come over the coming years. And this is super exciting. I do have 2 more questions, maybe 1 more, because we are out of time actually. So let me pick the right one. Okay, this is maybe a good one. Might be for you, Raf, or you, Ben, whoever speaks first. Once the delegate reputation score is implemented and stOBOL is only earned if delegated to an active delegate, do you expect that will change the behavior of stOBOL voting power in DeFi? That might actually be also a good question for you, Thomas. Really the one who wants to communicate. So will kind of the behavior of OBOL in DeFi be impacted by the implementation of the DRS and logic and staking rewards gateway?
So I think a lot of this comes back to the idea of the default or the auto delegate strategy, and how the DAO iterates on that over time. What is in that strategy and how it treats the tokens that are there and the voting power that is there is going to really heavily impact the way that those things play out. And like we talked about before, that is ultimately in the hands of the DAO, right? The DAO has self-sovereignty over the rules around how that voting power is used, and so and what it incentivizes. So I think that's going to be the determining factor in the long run. In the short run, I wouldn't expect any dramatic changes, frankly. But in the long run, I think that'll be what would probably drive outcomes.
The way I like to make an analogy here between the token and its voting powers, before this system, you sort of got to the crossroad if you're driving a car where you have to choose staking or governance. And typically going into one side of the road would forfeit the other. Now, with staking, you're actually taking both paths simultaneously, but they still have their own track. So we are very familiar with the DeFi track and the token track. You can use that token, do all sort of things in DeFi. Everyone's very familiar with that. Now, the other governance track, which is parallel and we can do a lot of things, is a bit less developed. That road is probably still like a dirt road. Today, we just had that auto strategy. We can develop more strategies. And maybe DeFi protocols can also choose their own strategy, or they can redelegate to someone directly. That voting power doesn't have to be lost. So I think that dirt road still has a lot of progress to do, but it's getting paved, right? While the other one, which is pure like the token dynamic, people are very comfortable with. So that's how I see them. They're parallel, but they need to be built separately.
That is good analogy. Let's transform that dirt road into a highway over the coming months. Well, guys, we are out of time, so I wanted to thank you, the 3 of you, Ben, Raf, for chiming in. It has been a pleasure working with you guys, and we will have other works to do in the future, and we do have ongoing things. Thomas, thank you for your time as well. I think those times are exciting. We have a chance to build something that scales, and while not replicating the mistakes that we've seen in other DAOs that have become too big and too big to be able to be agile and to change. And for us, it's just changed to not replicate that mistake and build something that's will last for the long run on solid foundations. So really excited. Thank you guys all. For the community, please come talk to us in our Discord. Visit the website, engage with us, interact on Twitter, come and find us. Also check the forum if you want to get involved in governance. Lots of things to do, always open for a good conversation. and let's build the future together.
Awesome. Really enjoyed the
Thanks,
combo.
Leo. Thanks
guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye all.